So in general, when I run these things, I guess I should answer the same questions. I'm Barak from Yeshiva University, and yeah, I do a lot of these kinds of learning programs. And one of the things that I try to do is I always preface by saying that I like a lot of questions. I accept a lot of questions, and whatever the question is, I always make a point to say that even if it's a ridiculous question, I try to answer very seriously because you never know what somebody really wants to know and when they're making a joke. So often when I do this preface, there's always that one guy who decides to ask a joking question or to really try to fragile on me, you know? So one of the questions I actually got after saying this is that they said, oh, in the book Harry Potter, they're all witches. So why in December do they celebrate Christmas? And unfazed, I gave him the what I think is at least the correct answer. I said, because what they're celebrating is not really Christmas the way that we know it, but rather it's actually the pagan winter solstice, and that's why one of the big things they do is go under the evergreen tree. And you actually see that gift giving is very common, and that actually was very common for witches. Now, obviously, he looked at me and he's like, okay, I'm impressed. And for the rest of the share, he was quiet. But sometimes I don't always have the answer in the back of my mind. And one of the times, somebody asked me, point blank, why is Judaism so racist? And so I tried answering a little bit, and he stopped me and he's like, okay, obviously you are going to say what you're going to say, but in truth, I don't really care. I don't want to practice so much. So I say that, and I just wanted to go. But I ended up, after going home after him saying that, I ended up writing up a whole share. And 3 years later, on a random trip to Israel, I saw him, and it was actually fascinating. I went into a yeshiva, and sure enough, there he was, the top student in that yeshiva. And I came over to him and I said, like, oh, you probably don't remember me, but you actually inspired me to write a big share of mine. And okay, it was a little awkward. I like if you imagine, it's not what you hear every day. But after the initial like, who is this guy again? He's like, oh, you're the racist guy. I'm like, yeah, that's me, the racist. But I ended up giving him the share, and he really, he thought he was impressed, and he said, wow, I wish I knew what you taught me. Like, I wish I listened 3 years ago. So with that in mind, we're going to deal with the question of, is Judaism racist? So before we actually deal with this question, we really need to break down the words. Whenever you're trying to understand something, you have to know what it means and how something progressed into what we understand today. So the Anti-Defamation League defines racism as the belief that a particular race is superior or inferior to another, that a person's social or moral traits are predetermined by his inborn biological characteristics. That's racism. And actually, believe it or not, racism is not an inborn trait. Racism actually developed over time. And interesting, even though slavery is considered the big racist issue, slavery was actually very common and had nothing to do with race. It had something to do with who they conquered. And believe it or not, the first time that the Scottish or the Irish went to the first time the Irish went to Africa and they actually met a person of color, a black person in Africa, they actually said that they saw them as completely equal and fierce fighters. And it actually only became later on in history do we see racism came. And ironically enough, for our class card, is Judaism racist? Turns out the first racism was against the Jews. Historically, a university in Texas makes the claim, and it's actually well known for historians, that the first sign of racism was against the Jews, and it was paintings that depicted Jews as devils and demon-like creatures and money obsessed. So I guess things don't really change so much. But as times progressed and we get into the Enlightenment era, people started really thinking more, and now slavery became very wrong, but it became very needed for society. So what did they do? They ended up creating racism. This idea that, oh, these people are inherently less than us. Now, as this progressed and Darwinism came and evolution, the theory of evolution came, they took these theories and they incorporated into the racist ideals, and they created social Darwinism. That even in the human race, there's higher, more elite humans and less elite humans. But going on, that's the history. So now, understanding where racism plays a role, we can actually take a look at this question: is Judaism racist? And I know we barely spoke, but I would tell you that the answer is no. Very quick, no. And there's one simple reason. If racism is all about the inability to become better, that you are stuck. If you are, as we said, that you are predetermined to be at the bottom because of your race, skin, or nationality, that's racism. Judaism, the simple fact that it has the idea of conversion makes it not racist. The Jewish religion actually accepts African Americans, it accepts Asians, Latinos, all cultures, and we say that every single person can be a Jew. But of course, that's not the real question. The real question the guy was trying to get to the bottom of is Judaism elitist? What do I mean by that? Does Judaism say that they are the best and anybody who's not a Jew is bad? Now, what I want to talk about is, what does the Torah really believe? Is this the Torah? Now we need to look at all the sources to understand this claim. I mean, just looking at the Torah, we can understand why people would think this. We're called the chosen people, a holy nation. We have tons and tons of prohibitions that make sure that we stay away from other people. We're not allowed to intermarry. We can't eat certain foods. We're not even allowed to eat or drink with non-Jews. And we can't even dress like them. So fully, I understand where this theory comes from. But in order to delve in, we really do need to look in the Torah. And actually, the key is that we have to look at the very beginning. We have to look at Judaism. The reason why I'm even hesitant to say that is that Judaism has 3 characteristics that no other religion has. Number 1, we are the only religion that has a blessing after we eat food. Lots of religions have a grace, have a system in place that they bless food before we eat it. And that makes sense. You're hungry, all you can think about is the effort that it came to get to this food. So you thank God or whoever for that food, and then you move on. But Judaism has it in its system that even afterwards, even after you're satisfied, we make a very specific point to thank God. We're the only religion that does that. Number 2, we are the only religion that has a blessing after using the bathroom. And I know that seems kind of crazy, but it actually teaches a big lesson on Judaism. Because using the restroom is considered the most bestial thing we can do. And nevertheless, we want to say that even that comes from God. And so we spend that blessing thanking God that everything works properly, and we're dedicating even the most base thing that we can do into the service of God. But the third major difference between all religions is the most important one. That is, only Judaism says that any race, creed, or nation can get a part of our heaven, can go to Olam Haba as long as they're good people. And as long as they're productive members of society. So what does that mean exactly? What does it mean to be good in the eyes of the Torah and for every single nation, no matter what religion, to get in? Basically, they have to follow the 7 Noahide laws. 7 laws that say that somebody is a good person according to the Torah. What are these 7 things? It's all about what you need to have a functioning society. So one of them is you can't murder. It's hard to have a society if everybody's killing each other. You can't rob. That one also makes sense. Theft is very hard. You have to have a system of justice. You have to have a system that if somebody does something wrong, they're held accountable. You're not allowed to have adultery or sexual transgressions, because when you have a society that's constantly moving around, there's constantly war, there's constantly fighting. So can't have any of that. There's no idol worship. You're not allowed to curse God. Now, the reason why that's on this list is because, interesting, you don't have to believe in God, but you're not allowed to curse God. And that's because a system of justice works only when you have a system of justice works only when you have people to see you. Outside in public, people can easily see what you're doing. And so, yeah, it's easy to be a good person. Nobody likes to commit crimes publicly. It's a big issue. But when you're alone in your house, when nobody else is looking, it's that belief in a God, it's that belief in a supreme force that has you follow the din inside. So if you go and you curse that idea and you ridicule Judaism, or if you ridicule any sort of God, it really takes a lot out of people. And the final seventh Noahide law is that you're not allowed to eat a limb of a live animal, which seems like the weirdest of all of them, but it makes sense when we realize what it's trying to say. Eating a limb out of a live animal is considered the most animalistic thing we can do. It's the most barbaric, it's torture to the animal, and it causes suffering. Now, Judaism and a human is supposed to recognize his place in humanity, and he's supposed to give mercy to even the smallest of animals. So therefore, one of the laws is that you have to make sure if you eat animals, that the animal is fully dead and that you're not torturing it more than that. But if you follow these 7 things, then the Torah says you have a place in Olam Haba. Once again, this is the only the only religion that says this. Christianity says you must believe. And if you don't believe, even if you're a great person, there's not much for you. And even if you're a bad person, if you believe, eventually you'll be healed and you can go to heaven. And the Muslims say if you're not a Muslim or you didn't die in holy war, then there's nothing. So now we're seeing a fundamental change in how to understand Judaism. Because obviously, if we believe that every single person has this Olam Haba, then we actually get a lot of questions. But this isn't the only thing that we should be asking. Even more, a second point is it says right at the very beginning of the Torah, in Bereshit Aleph, in the very, very beginning, Genesis 1, the Torah says that all men, all humankind, are created B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. Now that's a big deal. Every single person, man, woman, child, no matter who they are all created in the image of God. Therefore, there shouldn't be a race issue because we're all brothers, we're all family. But if we're all equal, why are we called the chosen nation? And why do we need a chosen nation? And probably even the bigger question, we're called the chosen nation, but what are we chosen for? What is the purpose of the Jew? Why should we have to do this? Because, yeah, I can give you sources from Bereshit, I can give you sources from logic. But at the end of the day, if you look at the Torah, there are practical differences. All of the nations, every non-Jew, has 7 mitzvot to keep. But how many do we have? 613.
Always give you what you bless someone with? No. And that might be a good.
Hello? Okay. Right, we have 613. So why so much responsibility? Why is there such a gap between non-Jews and Jews? If we all say that we're all brothers and we're all working for the same thing, why are Jews chosen to have 613 commandments and everybody else only has 7? So I think in order to understand the reason why we have so much more responsibility, we need to know, what does the Torah think about Jews? And so for that, I want everybody to look at Exodus chapter 4, verse 22. Jews are called God's firstborn. Now, when it comes to being a firstborn, is a firstborn inherently better than all of the children that come later? I don't think so. Is no problem. Wait, are they inherently better? Do their parents love a firstborn more? No. But a firstborn is given more responsibility. Now, why is that? Why should a firstborn be given more responsibility? And it actually has to do with the role of a firstborn. A firstborn is considered a guide. They're the role models for society. They're the role models for the children who come later. Because the issue is, oftentimes, things that parents do are completely impossible, they're unrelatable to the children. Kids don't pay bills, kids don't go to board meetings, and they don't even drink coffee. So how are we supposed to take the lessons of adulthood and of parenthood and bring it down to our life? That's the role of the older sibling. That's the role of the firstborn. The firstborn is meant to be this generation gap. So what's an example? We know that kids don't pay bills, but paying bills is a form of being responsible, of paying on time, of making sure that you're making payments. Now, if a kid is meant to understand that, they can learn that normally through the older sibling. Let's say the older sibling has a mug, and that mug fell to the ground and shattered. Now, if a kid wanted to, he could hide it up or he could blame one of his younger brothers. But but to be a good role model, you actually have to admit what you did. You have to take responsibility for your actions. And when a younger sibling sees this in the Bahar, in the firstborn, now that lesson that the parents wanted to give over is given over. So the Torah sees us as a firstborn. And in that way, we're meant through our actions to teach the ultimate lessons of God. Now, the Jews were tasked with being the world's firstborn. They were tasked to teach the whole world that there is a God and that He's active in their lives, and that and He is judging everything. That's the ultimate purpose of the Jew. And through the example of Israel and the Jews, throughout history, mankind was meant to discover God. Now, how is this possible? How, through the Jews' existence, are we meant for this to happen? Well, there's either two ways that this can happen. Jews always exist. And when Jews live up to their responsibility, good things happen. You see that they become great giants in literature and math. We're going to get into it a little bit more later. And actually, if you look through history and you look at Jews when they're not following the responsibilities that they're given, they get destroyed. Bad things happen nonstop. Terrible, terrible tragedies. But nevertheless, throughout all of history, the Jews are there. Now, why is that special? It's because the Jews need to exist, because otherwise we don't have a role model of how the world works. But if there's a someone that's able to withstand all of time, not the strongest, it's not even the smartest, it's not the wealthiest, but they can survive, it has to be something else. And actually, Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch gives a good summary of this. And he says, thus by the Jews' fate and way of life, the Jews were meant to teach an object lesson about God and about man's task, which otherwise mankind would just have learned indirectly through historical experience. Now, what is this lesson that the Jews were meant to teach? What is the lesson that a Jew is meant to teach in every single moment? Simple. There is one God for all beings, who's the creator, lawgiver, judge, guide, keeper, and father of all beings, and all beings are his servants, his children. So too is man. He receives everything from God's hand, is meant to use it for his will. No matter what the Jews do, they accomplish this role. When Jews do good and they keep the mitzvot, it's easy to see, wow, this is a godly nation. And when things don't go well, the people could see, wow, these people have to have God, otherwise they would be completely wiped out. Now, it's good what we're saying in theory. Like, okay, I get it. But practically, has this ever worked? Has this system ever actually been successful? So, to understand this, we actually have to look at a famous quote by Mark Twain. Mark Twain is not Jewish, and yet he saw this issue, he recognized this paradox of the Jew, and he wrote about it at length. And he wrote an essay called Concerning the Jews. So I'm going to read it for you right now. Concerning the Jew. If the statistics are right, the Jews constitute but 1% of the human race. Now, just for a record, that's 0.2%. Jews are 0.2% of the human race, but nevertheless, his point stands. It suggests a nebulous dim puff of stardust lost in the blaze of the Milky Way. Properly, the Jew ought hardly to have been heard of, but he is heard of. and he's always been heard of. He is as prominent on this planet as any other people, and his commercial importance is extravagantly out of proportion for the smallness of his bulk. His contributions to the world list of great names in literature, science, art, music, finance, medicine, and abstruse learning are always way out of proportion for the weakness of his numbers. He has made a marvelous fight in this world, in all the ages, and he does it with his hands tied behind his back. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. The Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Persians rose, filled the world with splendor and sound, and then faded away into dream stuff and passed away. The Greeks and the Romans followed and made a vast noise, but yet they too are gone. Other people have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now, or have vanished. The Jew has seen them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert and aggressive mind. All things are mortal, but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? Now, Mark Twain is getting on something very big. Mark Twain is so close, and yet he's left with the final question. And maybe that's due to the fact that Mark Twain considered himself an optimistic agnostic. He refused to admit that just perhaps God was the secret. But the truth is, that is the only way to understand how every single nation has risen, small and large, been conquered and destroyed, and are merely specks in the history book of life. But what is it meant to be? Why were the Jews given so much power? And I think the answer is actually clear. And I think that to understand this, we need to understand Spider-Man. Yeah. Spider-Man says, with great power comes great responsibility. Technically, it's Uncle Ben, but we're getting beside ourselves. Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. But the truth is, the converse is absolutely true as well. With great responsibility comes great power. Imagine a CEO. The CEO is the most powerful one in an office, in a business. He can fire anybody, he can hire everybody, he has the largest paycheck. The reason why he has so much power is that all of the responsibility of the company is on him. If the company goes under, he's to blame. He is the responsibility, and he makes sure that everything works. Now, Hashem gave the Jews all of their responsibility. He gave the Jews an option, and he says, I'm going to give you all of this responsibility. I'm going to give you 613 mitzvot, and if you do it, I'm going to give you great power. I'm going to make sure that you are an amazing nation, and everybody knows it. But you have a choice. You don't have to accept this power. You don't have to accept this. So you don't have to accept this responsibility. But if you lose the responsibility, so does your power. You become as small as the nation that you were meant to be. We see this throughout history. When we heed the call and accept the responsibilities, we are granted great power. We become leaders of the world, hearts of the field, leaders in the field of literature, science, math, art, history, everything. We become truly the light upon the nations. But if we don't accept our responsibilities, we become just like everybody else, just a nation. But this still leaves us with a problem. Earlier, I called the Jews a holy nation, a Goy Kodesh, an Am Kodesh. But what does it mean to be holy? If we are holy, it seems to imply that everybody else is less holy. How can that possibly not be elitist? We're the holy nation. We're so holy. We're so much better than everybody else. But in order for us to understand this, we really need to know what is this word? What is holiness? We're called the Goy Kodesh. But what is Kodesh? And actually, we see something very interesting. It says in Deuteronomy 3:18 that God commands us, and he tells there should not be a single woman who is a Kadesha, nor can there be a single man who is a Kadesh. But I don't understand. How can the Torah tell us Kadesh, which comes from the word Kodesh? Is the Torah trying to possibly tell us not to be holy? That seems to be what it claims. Men should not be a Kadesh, and a woman should not be a Kadesha. And even bigger, what does this word mean in English? Every single commentary says that the word Kaddish, it means prostitute. So meaning the Torah is trying to tell us men can't be prostitutes and women can't be prostitutes. But why is the word prostitute the same word as holiness? Literally, almost the exact same, the same roots and the same word. So I think the answer is that we just don't understand what it means to be kadosh. We don't understand what kadesh means. It doesn't mean holy, but it means separate. What's so special about what is a kadesha? It's somebody who separates themselves from society, who doesn't allow normal life to begin. A prostitute's never able to be part of society, and the same thing's true. Some people say a prostitute, they separate sex, the act of sex, from love and a commitment and a relationship and marriage. That's what it means. It's this act of separation. And we can see too that holiness can be this act of separation. Now, the word for mundane is chol. And we say there's chol and there's Shabbat. And Shabbat is Kaddish. The only reason why Shabbat is special is because it's separated from the mundane. And we see this in life. In the movie The Incredibles, we actually see a brilliant villain, and we see Syndrome, and he makes a point, and he says, what was his brilliant plan? His brilliant plan was that he was going to destroy all of the villains, and he was going to use their superpowers, and he was going to make the world super. And it's brilliant. He was going to give every single person superpowers. The rich, the poor, every single person was super. And there's one line that's probably one of the most iconic lines of the whole film. He says, when everybody is super, then nobody is. It's the same thing with Kedusha. When every single person is holy, when everything is Kedusha, then nothing is. But now we understand what it means to be a Goy Kodesh. It doesn't mean a holy nation, but rather it means a separate nation. Now we understand why all of these mitzvot are telling us that we're not allowed to be with the other nation. Because if the Jews are with other people, if they just get lost, then they disappear. And the mission that they have disappears. Now we understand why we can't intermarry. Why there's such an issue with mixing together, because we'll lose the precious thing that we have. We'll lose our mission to this world. Now, the last question, though, on the same note, is why were we picked? Couldn't any nation do this? I get the point. I get it. There needed to be a chosen nation. There needed to be somebody to guide the world. There needed to be a separate nation who stood outside of everybody else and who taught them. But why the Jews? Why us? And now, the Midrash, the rabbinic interpretation of the Torah, elaborates, and it says Bereshit Rabbah that the reason why we were chosen is simple. We chose God. We are the chosen people because we chose to be. We chose God. And God gave us the choice to accept at Mount Sinai, and we all, 603,550 men from the ages of 20 and 60, accepted at one moment all the laws. When you factor in all the women and children, anybody below the ages of 20 and everybody above the ages of 60, we estimate that 2.5 million people accepted the Torah. 2.5 million people accepted to be this chosen nation. It wasn't just a decision that Abraham made. It was a decision that we all made. And actually, we see this further. This is what it means when it says in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 3, that the Jews are called the first of God's crops. We are the first ones to sprout. We are the first ones to recognize our true purpose in this world. But nevertheless, it's very interesting. We're called God's first fruits, but we're not called God's only fruits. And that's because we truly believe that every single person will sprout. Every single nation will come and will accept the Torah. And that's actually one of the goals of Shavuot. Shavuot is the holiday of us accepting this Torah, of us accepting our role in mankind. And there's a famous midrash, there's a famous story that goes along Shavuot that says that God went to every single nation out there, and he asked, will you accept my Torah? Will you become a chosen people? And every single nation decided that they found an excuse to not do it. Every single nation said no. And so then God came to the Jews, and the Jews said in one voice and with one heart that they would do and they would listen. They would do all of the mitzvot. But people don't only stop that story there. People don't really think about the implications of this midrash. The truth is, it's not that God wanted one nation to have the Torah. No, God wanted every nation to get the Torah. He knew the Jews were going to accept. Abraham already accepted. But he wanted to give a chance for the whole world to accept the Torah. He wanted to give them a chance to become like the Jews, to all become chosen, to actually go and they do it. And this is actually what's amazing. This is what we're talking about when we mention in Isaiah 49:6 that the Jews are meant to be a light unto the nations. The Jews are meant to be a beacon of light throughout the centuries to try to get the world there. Because God never gives up on anybody. God does not give up on a single human being, let alone a nation, let alone any other religion. And so through the Torah, we are meant to guide and instruct the entire world. And not only that, but every single prophet, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, when they discuss the messianic times, the ultimate end of days, they explain that all people, race, and nation, and creeds will end up working together. They will accept Hashem and live in peace and do what the will of God is. Now, I want to conclude by reading a passage from Deuteronomy, chapters 33 verses 2 through 4. Now, if you will. While God loves all of the nations, it is his separate ones that become tools in his hands. It is the Jews who are used by God. We are called God's tools. God loves every being, every animal, every creation, but the Jews are different. The Jews are tools to be used for something else. We have a different calling. Now back to the verse. When they shall be led through the steps of their acts, all of the nations will come forth and utter the words that the Torah which Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, commanded us, we will do, and we will hear, and we will be a heritage upon the congregation of Yaakov. Every single nation will come at this point and recognize the Torah, the ultimate Torah, will guide the world. This is from Devarim. This is from our books, our testimony, our guidebook that says that our mission in this world is to be there. Now, sum up. The Jews are not elitist. You just have a different job. Just as when you're in a hospital, nobody's more important, not a surgeon, not a diagnostician, not even the gender is not important. It turns out that before there was actually before they were able to clean out, most people died in hospitals due to infection, due to diseases, due to the spread of all these viruses. In reality, genders are just as important. In reality, on a football team, not a single person is there. Maybe the quarterback makes more money. Maybe the quarterback gets more fame. But every single person is needed and every single role needs to be had. This is what we accepted on Shavuot and at Sinai. And again, this is what we were meant to accept. This Shavuot, this Thursday night, we are meant to accept this thing again. We were meant to accept our role as Bachars, as the firstborn, and as light among the nations. Okay, that's what I had to say. I would love to open up. I hope that's fine with Bach to questions. Otherwise, I can give you my information. You could also talk to Yaakov. I can answer anything. I'm very happy. I do this all the time. So if anybody has questions, I'm here.